Chucky, if you're watching this, you're a terrible person and you should be really upset with yourself. Hey minions, welcome to Crank It Up. This is the Postmortem for Game 25, featuring Itty Critter Grims versus ancient Egyptian luchadors, the Lucha Egyptians. Unfortunately, I'm here to say that the Lucha Egyptians lost in 2 games, and that Chucky is singularly responsible for eliminating them, which is why he is such a terrible person. I was devastated after this loss, even though I felt like I was going to lose, because it was winnable at one point, which was surprising because it absolutely shouldn't be winnable. This is a very bad matchup for ancient Egyptian luchadors, and let's talk about that. There are a number of reasons why. What makes ancient Egyptian luchadors so good? Obviously, their specials. The fact that they can just swing bases so much at the last second really bodes well in their favor. But there's a couple of things that is predicated on. The first thing is that you need minions in play to set up, which the Itty Critter Grims, by the fact that their minions are temporary, makes it a lot harder to do that. Additionally, they have abilities that can make minions leave play. They can evolve their own minions, and you definitely saw Smashness doing that a lot. Basically, he would destroy any minion that had a setup action because he felt that he had more recursion than the luchadors had, even though they do have a good amount of recursion itself. The other thing that they can do is that they can spread the power evenly out among multiple minions. Reversal can give you presence on a base, but it can't necessarily make you win the base, because when you think about it, even if you were to do a play like Prince Charming and Charming Princess and Critter Coach and then a Grim Minion and then the other Grim Minion with teamwork, that's going to be a number of minions that are all 4 power. Even if you reversal one of them, that's only going to make it 16-4. Even if you do Plague of Locusts, that's only going to make it 12-4. There's a number of things that they can do to slow them down, but because there's not a clear reversal candidate, no minion is going to be singularly large, and even with someone like Krakatoad, they can play around it. It doesn't bode well for the Lucha Egyptians. But what they simply cannot really do anything about is the 0 to breakpoint potential that this team has. Whether it's 16 or 20 or 24 power, this team can just explode out of nowhere, and there's nothing that ancient Egyptian luchadors can do about it. You saw this on so many levels with the sheer number of solo bases. I think at one point it was actually 7-0 in the first game, because on top of the solo base potential, they also have the means to destroy you and to kick you off. The mummies, they're great for staying in play, but they are absolutely fodder for shell shock. Tadpor, incredibly powerful. They could just move minions off. That's why we named Tadpor and Shell Shock the MVP of Game 1, because they just kept moving minions, where they weren't supposed to be, or destroying them outright. Now, I've been playing this game a long time and analyzing it for a long time, and I like to think that you pick up certain things along the way, and that certain things will become obvious. And the final factor that really boded poorly for ancient Egyptian luchadors was just the fact that you take the bases combined with one key difference between Itty Grims, and you know that they're going to lose Game 1 even before it starts. And that is Q Point and Rainbow Rock. Now, I've had this debate with a lot of people, and I get that there's always going to be disagreement about it, but for me and my experiences, my mind is pretty made up. And it's about Titans and whether or not they provide an advantage. I believe very strongly that a team that has a Titan, when there is no other Titan in play, if that Titan provides power, it is an extreme advantage. If that Titan does not provide power, it is a significant advantage. But if it provides at least 1 power, that is going to be extreme. And that is precisely what happened in both games. When Rainbow Rock comes out, he just gets 1 power counter. That is presence that the ancient Egyptian luchadors can do nothing about. It can be 3 or 4 points for free. Now, you try to play around this as best as you can, but there's not a lot that you can do about it. In the first game, Q Point. Q Point is a 5-4-3 base with a very high breakpoint. What do? You put Rainbow Rock in there. If Rainbow Rock has 1 power, you are guaranteed 4 points. Q Point cannot destroy Rainbow Rock because he's a Titan. He is a card, but minions and actions are the ones that are are being destroyed. So the Titans will remain on Q point. So 1 power for 4 points, that's incredible. But it has a very high breakpoint, and you might think that it's going to be some time before that base scores. But combine that with Tadpor, what that also means is that the ancient Egyptian luchadors regrettably have no movement. When they play, they're effectively stuck there, which is oddly fitting for a faction that revolves around burying. Because you have Tadpor, repeatable movement, what that means is that you can push multiple minions over to Q point. In fact, you can push 24 power or more worth of minions towards Q point. The Q point player has absolutely no incentive to break that base because they know that they're going to be giving 4 points away for nothing and they'll be doing all the work. The Itty Critter Grim player has no incentive to break that base because they just are going to be, forfeiting 4 free points. They'll be doing more work and they'd lose Rainbow Rock, whereas Rainbow Rock can be free shuffling and free recycling for turn after turn after turn. Now, this may create a counter situation where you want to break that base as quickly as possible to get Rainbow Rock off the board to at least take away that weapon. But if you do that, then you're opening Rainbow Rock to do its other focus, which is add power to a base. And as a Titan that can move with power counters, even if it's just 2 or 3, that can make an extreme difference. And that combination is really going to be the nail in the coffin for ancient Egyptian luchadors. It happened in game 1. We saw it coming. We saw it coming a mile away. What's absolutely crazy about Itty Critter Grims is that they executed this plan, pushing everyone to Q point, and still won the base. They still have enough weapons to win the game repeatedly and then still overtake everything because of Q point's destruction. That's absurd. I had been saying in my previous postmortem that I wanted more from Itty Critter Grims, that they weren't really playing like a number 1 seed, and that they wanted a statement game. Well, I think game 1 was that statement game, as it was very convincing. You don't even have to care about the solo score that they had against them because they're in a very comfortable lead and they know that the game is ending. They're just trying to make sure that they don't lose by any stretch of the imagination. They're rushing Q point at that point because they know that it's going to be the game, and then they end up winning it, which is what they did. Game 2 is a slightly different story. Obviously, Q point isn't in there, but Rainbow Rock still is in. With the initial spread of bases, your hands are kind of tied at that point. You can go for Itty City, but it's a minion recursion base. It doesn't really benefit the Itty Critter Grims that much because they already have, a ton of recursion anyway. So by getting that off the board, it might actually hurt me, who really could use minion recursion. I would absolutely love to get some of my Pyramid Engineers back. I can go for the Golden Lily, but that's a 3-2 base. That's not really how I'm going to win the game. If ancient Egyptian luchadors stand any chance, they have to be stealing bases, and they have to win the bases that have 2-point splits. That means my only other chance is to go for a 5-3 base, because that's the only one that's out there, but it has a significant breakpoint. Can I break it before Itty Critter Grims break the next base, bring out Rainbow Rock, and then send Rainbow Rock over there for an easy 3 power? Turns out the answer is no, because Itty Critter Grims are so explosive. And yet, despite all that, because of the extra plays, because of the card draw, Luch Egyptian still managed to hold on. There is no shame in losing 15-12 to the number 1 seed, especially when there were solo points scored against you. I could have a minion on a base who is well protected. If a team can kick you off a base at the same time as scoring it solo, at a certain point, you just have to tip your hat to them and say, well done. I did everything possible to try and prevent that from happening, but it didn't work out that way. If I had drawn 1 more card, or if things had been drawn slightly differently, it would be an entirely different story. They actually would have forced game 2, at which point I'm pretty sure they would have been obliterated in game 3. Just because of burying, providing extra plays, going first really makes such a big deal. And, in game 2, they had the ability to go first, which is why I'm trying to, go for the gutsy play to try and rush that base as quickly as possible. It just didn't work out. I'm very sad about the fact that they're losing, not surprised. Obviously, I know it was going to be an uphill battle, but one of the things that really stands out about March Smashness is that you have a chance to really fall in love with the team. And you shouldn't, because when I get emotionally attached, I get very upset when a team that I like loses. Obviously, that happened with Kaiju Innsmouth, and I'm still not really over that, if I'm being honest. But Ancient Egyptian Luchadors, they were a team that was created specifically for March Smashness. They were the one team that was really theory crafted, and it's like, I hope this works. I think that it would. It sounds like it should work on paper. I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know if I'm going to like it. And I just fell in absolute love with them. It's unfortunate that this elimination game is actually the first time I've lost with them. They had a perfect pre-exhibition series. When I was playing them, they had a perfect exhibition series, and then they won the first two games, and they especially won against Superhero Princesses, which was a major upset, one of the two biggest upsets in round one. And so I'm proud of that. I called them the dark horse candidate, and a lot of people, got on the bandwagon very quickly, and I think that's great. The fact that they got to round 3, that's good. You don't want to make a prediction like that and then have them lose in round 1. And it's really not that meaningful if they win one game and then go home in round 2. I think getting to round 3, serves them well. It means that they made a run, they got their name out there, they lost to the number 1 seed, and there's no shame in that. So good for them. I'm really happy about that. I was reminded of similar experiences last year when I talk about, discovering teams that you really like. And the team that I was reminded of last year was not Kaiju Innsmouth because I had played them a bunch. I knew that they were very strong going in, which is why I seeded them appropriately. No, it was Vigilante Orcs who had been on my mind this week as a team that I had played once before the first March Smashness, and then I got to play them over and over again, and I really just kind of fell in love with them. And there's a lot of similarities to Ancient Egyptian Luchadors because just like with the Vigilantes and the Orcs, it's not a synergy that seems really apparent. A lot of people might look at that and say, I don't know what that team is supposed to do, but they work really well together, and they're two factions that are really hurting for synergy partners because what do you really do with Orcs? One of the most common questions that I get as far as faction synergy is, what do you pair with Ancient Egyptians? Because they have burying, but not a lot of people view it as a means of playing extra cards, or what do they do with it? It's usually pair them with werewolves for marking territory, pair them with overgrowth of killer plants. Those are obvious plays, but they just combine so well with Luchadors because the specials and the oppression that they had, the versatility that they had. It reminded me very much of Vigilante Orcs, who can do a little bit of everything, who are very defensive in nature, can be very oppressive in nature, and they made a run to the Final Four. It would have been great if Ancient Egyptian Luchadors did the same thing, but they didn't. They made it to round 3, and that's great. Itty Critters, a lot of people discount them because they don't know how to play them. They just mesh so well with the Grim Fairy Tales, and I'm glad that they're finally playing like it. They had very strong showings, and it's unfortunate that the victim in this game was the Luch Egyptians, but it happens. My bracket is happy, but my heart is not. I gave it everything I got. I will be very upset over this, and I will never forgive Chucky. So that's it for today's Postmortem. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's shut it down.